Two world wars have happened in this world, and countless stories have emerged from them. Stories that are real, but hard to believe. One of those stories is about the life of this soldier, Sergei Alshkov. Sergei Alshkov is recognized as the youngest soldier of World War II. How old is the youngest now? 15. Go down. 12 years. Go further down. 6 years old. Yes, this soldier was 6 years old. And the interesting thing is that this kid fought on one of the most brutal fronts of World War II against the Germans in Charvy. When the German army suddenly entered the land of the poet in 1941, the days were very long and they were kind of pushed aside. They thought it wouldn't be long before the Germans entered Moskva. That's why all the Soviet men were called up to defend against the Germans. In the army that was formed, a very high percentage of them were under 15 years old. So, under 15 years old, that's right, what can a 6-year-old do there? This child enters the army in a strange way. When the German army entered Soviet territory and was advancing towards Moscow, Sergei was living in a village near the city of Kaluga, Russia, with his mothers and his 7 older brothers. To keep the Germans out, the Red Army builds a museum in this village and waits for the Germans to come. The Germans were so powerful at this point that they could easily take this village and the entire Red Army. When the Germans captured this village, they captured the women and the grown men, but they had nothing to do with the child. They left Sergei, who was 5 years old at the time, just like that, Opan. They took his mother and brother. After capturing this village, they moved towards Moscow, which was 200 kilometers away from here. When the poets saw that the Germans had left this village, they attacked this village again from behind the German. And they set up an ambush there to somehow fight against the Germans. They encountered something strange in this village. A 5-year-old child who has neither a father nor a mother, all alone, hungry and thirsty in the village. This child was sitting alone in a corner, crying. Fortunately, it was summer, because if it had been winter, he would have frozen and stayed there. The Russian soldiers find this child and take him to their camp. This group of soldiers had a commander named Mikhail Vorobyat. He sees that this child has no one, so he adopts him. Mikhail was single and didn't have a wife, so he assigned a nurse to take care of this child. Mikhail really felt sorry for this child, because he knew that if he sent this child to the orphanages of that time in the Soviet Union, the child would surely die of hunger. That's why he felt compassion and decided to keep the child with him. A few months passed and the unit under Mikhail's command was ordered to go to Stalingrad, and they had to take the child with them. Wherever Mikhail and his group fought, the child and the nurse were present in the background, and sometimes they would help, for example, by bringing water to the front or other things. Mikhail and his men had settled in a place and had taken up positions, but they were unaware that a few German scouts had come behind the nearby haystacks and were giving coordinates to their mortar teams to target them. Sergei sees from a distance that the haystacks are moving and goes to tell Mikhail. Mikhail then sends a few soldiers to check it out. They realize that the German scouts are behind there and shoot at them. In a way, you could say Sergei saved the group. Despite being a child, Sergei was attentive to everything. One day, a mortar shell lands near a group of soldiers, killing most of them. But one of them gets buried under the soil. He was alive but lost consciousness. Sergei finds him and informs everyone. If Sergei hadn't informed them, he would have suffocated. Sergei's actions reach the ears of the higher commanders. They say this kid deserves to receive a Medal of Merit, and in April 1943, they award him the Medal of Merit. Interestingly, until that time, Sergei didn't have a military uniform to wear. But after they gave him this medal, they also brought him a military uniform in his size. He officially became a soldier. One of the soldiers also sews a few ranks onto the shoulders of this kid, and he becomes a lieutenant. From then on, they call this kid Little Lieutenant or Junior Lieutenant. Sergei was very happy with this uniform, but it created danger for him. Because when he wore regular clothes, snipers wouldn't shoot at him from a distance. But if you're wearing a military uniform, they definitely will. From a distance, they thought he was a short soldier. So once they shot at him from a plane, and another time they shot at him from between the trees. But both times, he got lucky and survived. After Sergei received the medal and the military uniform, he became somewhat famous. Gradually, the entire Soviet army got to know this child. He was known as the Little Lieutenant. In the higher ranks of the Soviet army, there was a marshal named Vasily Chuikov. When the news of this child reached Vasily, he said, "I must see this little soldier." Marshal Chuikov liked this child so much that he even gave him a gift. A Browning pistol, and he told him, "A soldier must always have a weapon." Of course, he also became very upset about the child's situation and said, "Why don't you send him to school?" His foster father said, "I had no one to take care of him. I was forced to take him with me everywhere." Marshal says, "Send him to Tula and enroll him in the best school there." It was very good for Sergei. He could both study and survive. After the Soviets defeated Germany, they didn't leave him without a medal and awarded Sergei a victory medal as well. Despite having a painful childhood and losing his parents and brothers, Sergei, with the help of his foster father Mikhail and the guidance of Vasily Chuikov, went to a good school, studied very well, and eventually became a lawyer. It's the same old story, where there's a will, there's a way. During those years, he practiced law in the city of Chelyabinsk, Russia, but he passed away early. In 1990, at the age of 54, Sergei Alexeyevich died of a heart attack. But don't think that Sergei was a unique child in the Soviet army. At that time, the Soviet army was full of children, many of whom were under 15 years old. And it's interesting to know that Soviet historians themselves write that these children were a crucial element in the army's victory over the Germans. A victory that cost many lives because to stop the Germans, they would send every young person forward, give them a weapon, and tell them to go, without training, without teaching strategy. They would go forward, and it got to the point where they ran out of weapons. Yet they still didn't stop sending them. They would tell a soldier to follow behind another soldier. And if he was killed, to take his weapon and fight. That's why the Soviet army suffered more than 10 million casualties on the front against the Germans. These were military casualties, whereas Nazi Germany, fighting against the entire world, had 5 million casualties. Keep in mind, these are only military casualties. In each of these countries, more civilians were killed than these numbers. This is the life of the youngest soldier of World War II. A soldier who was much more effective than his age would suggest.